This is a travesty. The government attorneys seem not to care about the law.
Will Krumholtz here with Alpha News. I'm here with attorney Erick Kaardal, and we're here to ask him some questions about some really important legal cases going on in Minnesota right now. Thanks for being with us, Erick.
It's great to be here, Will.
Yeah. So Erick, you've just sued the state of Minnesota over the mask mandate, and you're arguing that it's conflicting with a 1963 Minnesota law that says you can't conceal your identity when in public. And your lawsuit in federal court is specifically meant to keep that mask mandate from being enforced when people go to the polls in the, most importantly, the upcoming November election. So just tell us about that a little bit, please.
Well, the concern of the voters was the Minnesota Secretary of State, Steve Simon, on July 22nd issued a policy that election judges would be taking down the names of voters who didn't comply with Governor Walz's mask mandate. And that would then create a list of people who wore masks and didn't wear masks. And Minnesota has two laws regarding masks now. Governor Walz's law criminalizes not wearing a mask. Then Minnesota statute 609.735 criminalizes wearing a mask. And it's a strict liability statute. There's no intent required. If you're wearing a mask, you are liable for a crime. And so we have conflicting policies here. And that's why voters are concerned that if they go to the polling place wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, the Secretary of State Simon's election judges will take down their name for prosecution.
One thing the state plans to say back against your lawsuit is that if you're covering your nose and mouth because of the pandemic, that isn't in conflict with that Minnesota law that says you can't conceal your identity. What do you have to say back to that?
Well, the Traverse County Attorney Matthew Francis, who is the government, says that the laws do criminalize wearing a mask and not wearing a mask. So when you have government officials saying that's the case, then other government officials saying it's not the case, well, there's confusion. And so people don't want to be arrested and prosecuted for crimes. So the government needs to get its act together.
Gotcha. And certainly depending on the type of face mask you decide to wear too, sometimes that conceals your identity more than others.
Right, and I think that the idea of the state of Minnesota having conflicting laws, where the legislature has passed one law and the governor on his own shoots off with a conflicting law, the governor needs to work that out with the state legislature. And that's a problem, that the governor has shown a lack of leadership in working with the state legislature to resolve the conflicts of law. In fact, this happens all the time in the state legislature, and then these things get resolved. And Governor Walz here, despite the lawsuit and despite the impact on voting, he just lets it go on and on and on. And so that's a lack of leadership because it's very confusing to the people.
Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit, another election issue though. You're involved in several lawsuits against counties and municipalities over their practice of having city workers or hand-picked people from within the city or county be on the absentee ballot board to determine which absentee ballots are accepted or rejected. Tell us a little bit about why that's a problem and what your suits are doing about it.
I'm representing Minnesota Voters Alliance and the Republican Party of Minnesota, and in this case, we're challenging the city of Minneapolis, the city of Duluth, Ramsey County, and Olmsted County for not properly authorizing and appointing the absentee ballot boards. So in the olden days, it was very important to have election judges at the polls when everyone was voting at the polls, but now we've shifted more and more to absentee ballots. So if you're going to have problems with illegitimate votes being counted, vote problems, it's going to be in the absentee ballot process. And so Minnesota, correctly, after the Coleman-Franken race, passed a law saying that these absentee ballot boards must be appointed by the cities and counties, and they have to have party balance. They need to have Republican election judges and Democratic election judges reviewing every absentee ballot envelope and absentee ballot application. And they're supposed to actually be compared and scrutinized. And right now, these cities and counties have just been appointing staff members. Oh, it's too hard to call up these people on a list, these Republican election judges and Democratic election judges, so they're appointing staff instead. And so this is a travesty. The government attorneys seem not to care about the law, and so my clients are ensuring that the law is followed, and once it's followed, then we're going to have an independent absentee ballot board full of Republicans and Democrats making sure that the statute's followed. But currently, in a place like Minneapolis, my concern is that the staff isn't following the statute, and that these rigorous requirements for voting absentee are not being followed, and it's on purpose. And they don't want Republicans in the room. That's horrific. I mean, the law says Republicans are supposed to be in the room when absentee ballot applications and absentee ballot envelopes are compared. And right now, Minneapolis, Duluth, Ramsey County, and the County of Olmsted are okay with that not happening, even though the law requires it. It begs the question, why? Well, I don't think they want to follow the statutes. They just want to let all those absentee ballot envelopes be counted, even though they shouldn't be counted.
And Secretary of State Stephen Simon, Democrat, has really given cover for a lot of this activity through an administrative rule, correct?
That's right. They've been monkeying with, they've been messing around with the administrative rules, and they've really done a hash job of that too. We have 2 lawsuits in the Court of Appeals challenging the administrative rules. And the bottom line is that, they can't have it both ways. Secretary of State Simon can't say we have the best election system in the world and then have all these violations of the law in every aspect. I mean, 2018, we're in the U.S. Supreme Court. Simon loses about the polling place. And then now we're back in federal court on his new memo saying we're going to prosecute people who vote if they wear a mask or don't wear a mask. And that's another, we prosecute voters for voting. And now we have the absentee ballot board fiasco. I mean, the Secretary of State's office has become a joke. It's a serial violator of the law. It's an embarrassment. In my view, we have the worst election system in the nation, not the best like he pretends. And so, where's the accountability? Where's the leadership? Secretary of State Simon, just like Governor Walz, is a failure.
Yeah, and Alpha News has documented some of the existing problems with our absentee ballot system. Last question, Eric. There's some religious liberty concerns too with the governor's coronavirus executive order and his restrictions on churches getting together and meeting. And you're also coming up with action on that, or working on that right now. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We're going to be filing a federal civil rights action on behalf of churches in Minnesota. And these churches have noticed that every time that Governor Walz issues these mandates regarding coronavirus, from limitations on the number of people who can gather to mask mandates, that he's never making a religious accommodation. He's never making an accommodation for religious activities. He's never making an accommodation for houses of worship. Other states like Texas and Illinois, they've made accommodations for houses of worship because in America, we don't prosecute people who go to church. And we don't hold the religious leaders accountable if people in the pew aren't following regulations. And so the way Governor Walz has designed this is that people are prosecuted in church for not wearing a mask, and the religious leaders can be prosecuted for not making the person leave when they're not wearing a mask. And that's just not American. In America, we don't prosecute people for going to church or a synagogue or a mosque. And it's ridiculous. I mean, it's so un-American. And this was done very purposeful. If you look at the mask mandate, Executive Order 20-81, they could have put a religious accommodation in there, but instead they referred to it as a indoor public space and as a nonprofit business. And that's just wrong. When policies like that are issued, one of the first things that the governor should think about is, what are we going to do with houses of worship? How do we preserve the free exercise of religion? And in this administration, and I'm sure Attorney General Ellison was involved too, they omit it. They think about it, but they omit it and include it. And so here they omitted reference and included it in the bans because they're interested in prosecuting people who go to church. Otherwise, they would have excluded it.
Thank you, Eric, for your time today. And with Alpha News, this is Will Krumholtz. I appreciate everybody watching. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.